All right, so boom, welcome back. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is LP, and I'm on the come up. And today I'm going to be talking about how I've been able to afford USC on my own for the past 3 years. So my first video was fairly scripted, actually. I had a pretty long list of things that I want to talk about. This one is unscripted. I just have a spreadsheet basically with a bunch of numbers from my finances for my first 3 years. And I also have some financial aid summaries from school and whatnot. So just to start off with some background, my education has been pretty heavily subsidized via financial aid. When I was filling out the FAFSA and the CSS profile and whatnot when I was in high school and applying to college and whatnot, my estimated family contribution was 0. So that qualified me for a lot of need-based aid. And USC is actually very good about need-based aid, even though it is the most expensive school by tuition in the country. So I'm going to break down my actual financial aid profile that I got for this past year, just so you can kind of see which expenses I have and whatnot. And that should be on the screen if I'm able to edit that in. If not, then I'll put up some numbers behind me or something like that. But basically this year I was living off campus, or this past year I was living off campus. And what that means is that because my full need is met, basically USC meets 100% of financial need, I actually received a refund that helped cover part of my rent expenses. Now, this did not completely cover my rent expenses. I still had to pay a little bit out of pocket, a couple $1,000s. Rent here is pretty high, which I talked about a little bit in my last video. So if you want to check that out, definitely check that out. And actually my first 2 years I lived on campus. So in my first 2 years, because I was living on campus, basically paying rent on campus, I actually did have to pay the school directly. However, that did factor into my cost of living and dining. So ultimately, I won't be factoring in the cost of food outside of what I paid to school. All the expenses that I'll be talking about in this video relate exclusively to school and my rent expenses for this past year. No other miscellaneous things like travel or food or anything like that. So I'll probably flash up some numbers on screen as I go through this, but I do have some in front of me. So after my first year, I paid a total of $11,055 for my education, housing, and dining at USC. For my second year, it was actually a lot less, almost half the price, $5,678.16. And this past year, because I was living off campus, I actually was able to save some money, and I technically profited about like $256, which is cool, I guess. The school basically paid me to attend that past year, and that's also considering some kind of weird things with my rent last year, because I received a bonus for signing my lease, so that basically covered a month of my rent pretty much. But yeah, all in all, after 3 years, out of pocket for me has been about $16,500 roughly. So something to note about that $16,500 total out of pocket number that I just gave, that does not factor in the loans that I took. I also go over those a little bit more in my last video as well, but ultimately I have about $18,800 in loans. But most of them, wide majority of them, are subsidized, which means they do not accrue interest while I'm still a student. And I'm actually probably going to use my subsidized loans next year to completely wipe out my unsubsidized loans as well, which means I'll come out with 0 interest on loans pretty much. But more on that later. I'm actually going to get into my income now to talk about how I've been able to offset and actually basically eliminate that $16,500 out-of-pocket cost. So literally before I even got to school, I already had a job set up for me on campus. I had already applied and been accepted as a tutor for a small tutoring platform that's pretty local to this area. A lot of students work for that. So I already had that, but also on my first day, or maybe like second day, something like that, I went to the little on-campus job fair, and I basically immediately got hired with the spot that I'm still working at now. I'm on the university events team, and that's been basically like my main source of income the entire time I've been here. So I went through all my pay slips, and actually after 3 years, I have totaled $28,574.50 from that job. And after taxes, that comes out to be $28,022.56, which annually is $9,340.85. So this job has basically kept me afloat while I've been in school. Obviously, there are other expenses outside of tuition and living expenses that I have to account for as well. And without this job, I would be pretty screwed. And then on top of that job, I had also been a private tutor since high school. So I did continue that for a little while when I was in college. And I found exactly, just based on like Venmo transactions, that I had made literally exactly $3,000. But that did not account for maybe like 6 months. So I assumed and kind of estimate that my total income from private tutoring was about $4,500. All right, so after 3 years, that leaves me with a total income of about $33,074.50, which, considering my out-of-pocket costs, leaves me at a net total of positive $16,044.87 after my first 3 years at USC. But once again, this did not factor in the loans that I took out to kind of put myself in a position to be able to get to that spot. So if you do factor in the current loan balance that I have right now, I would actually be a true net of about negative $2,769.60 for my first 3 years. Now, like I said, none of these numbers really take into account much of my food expenses, travel, dining, anything like that. But to kind of talk about that a little bit more, I have been able to keep those costs as low as I possibly can, really. So I'm going to try to offer some tips on how you can save money while you're living at school. So I know a lot of schools have freshman meal plans. You have to have a meal plan when you're a freshman. Some schools require you to live on campus when you're a freshman and whatnot. So 2 points that I want to make here. First is that living on campus does tend to be more expensive than living off campus if you do it right, or I guess if you do it wrong. So if you live off campus, you tend to be able to save some money at the expense of a slight inconvenience of having to walk or commute in some type of way to campus for classes and whatnot. And one of my biggest differences in expenses between my first and second year was the meal plan. I had a full coverage meal plan for that first year. And the second year, I had a very partial, very reduced meal plan, which allowed me to do a lot more cooking because I actually had a kitchen in my unit at that time. So considering my second year cost about half as much as my first year, a lot of that actually was in the meal plan because at USC, the full coverage meal plan that all freshmen are required to have is like $3,500, which is kind of crazy if you break it down to like a meal by meal basis. I eat a lot of food, so I made the most of it, but still it's not worth it to do it again. If you are not a freshman or you're not required to do a meal plan, I suggest learn how to cook a couple meals and just rock with that because I can almost guarantee you will end up saving a lot of bread doing that. So obviously living off campus varies a lot from place to place, but I would just suggest to look at your options and see if you might be able to get someplace that has a kitchen compared to living on campus. You might not have a kitchen. And like I said, if you learn how to cook, it's a little bit of a time investment compared to like going to a dining hall or something like that, but it can save you a lot of money. And yeah, it honestly is definitely worth it if you ask me, depending on your financial situation or your time commitments or, things like that. Now, another suggestion I have, if you think you might not be able to get through school without taking out a lot of loans or worrying about a lot of expenses, I would suggest looking into work study potentially, or just getting a job on campus in general, because that could actually help reduce your costs a lot. Like I said, I made about $30,000 in my on-campus job roughly, and that's basically put me through school. I've done a lot of hours there for sure. Like I'm in there all the time as much as I possibly can be. But on-campus jobs do tend to be geared towards students. They understand that students have work to do and whatnot. So there has been a lot of times where I've gone to my job and just kind of gotten paid to do homework. But obviously that does also include real work as well. You know what I mean? I'm not slacking on that end at all. So, if you do decide to take a job, don't expect it to just be getting paid to do homework, because that's definitely not what it is. There probably will be some time where you are able to do that, but most of the time expect it, to be pretty busy and whatnot. Still, absolutely worth it though, in my opinion. Depending on what type of jobs your school offers as well, you might be able to actually get something that's kind of related to what you do. Mine personally is like, if I really want to look at it like that, I guess you could say I've learned some skills that transfer slightly, but still, like I said, definitely worth it for me. Even if I did just happen to have a lot of money fall into my hands out of nowhere, I would probably still keep this job because it would be kind of stupid to give it up. But yeah, man, that's going to do it for me. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope the unscriptedness of this video is not too rough. I'm still kind of getting used to talking to the camera, but, it's a work in progress, and I definitely want to make this video early because I feel like it might be the type to be a little bit more relatable to my early audience. So I'll be uploading another video later this week about how I've been able to travel once to twice per month ever since I've been in school. Kind of just going over some tips and tricks on how to travel for cheap as a student, and I guess actually just as a person in general. So yeah, man, stay tuned. I've been LP, and let's stay on the come on, man. Let's get it.